Welcome back to the community once again, ladies and gentlemen. Guess what? Something quiet is moving inside Nigeria's military system. What began as internal discipline months ago has now reached a former courtroom stage. Okay, so drawing careful attention across the country and of course the wider region.
Something is happening that we all may not know about. To the point where we say they sold the Russian flag, they hold and plenty, they held it in Kaduna, they held it in Kano, they held it in Katsina, and they held it in Jos. Do you understand? It's not a coincidence. Somebody somewhere is doing something. More they calculate, more they use our brain. I beg, more no come out to protest.
In Nigeria, a new military legal process is about to begin, yes, following serious claims involving servant officers. According to an official armed forces statement released today, January 27, 2026, some Nigerian military officers will actually face trial over allegations linked to a possible plan to remove the civilian government led by President Bola Tinubu. Ladies and gentlemen, guess what? The case is being handled inside the military justice system, and of course will actually follow establishment rules. So the situation began in October last year 2025. At that time, ladies and gentlemen, 16 military officers were actually taken into custody or they were imprisoned. Military authorities explained then that the arrests were due to acts seen as poor conduct and of course violations of service rules. During that period, ladies and gentlemen, the army publicly rejected report spreading online that suggested a coup attempt was actually underway. Officials insisted that there was no such threats and urged come. Now, guess what? After those arrests, the military launched an internal review to fully understand what had actually happened. This review took place quietly and, of course, followed standard procedures used within the armed forces. Months later, ladies and gentlemen, the investigation reached a conclusion. The military authorities have now confirmed that some of the officers involved will be brought, before a military judicial panel. Officials have not yet shared how many of the 16 officers we actually face trial. Ladies and gentlemen, what has been made clear is that the process is meant to promote responsibility, ladies and gentlemen, whilst respecting fairness and of course proper legal steps. Military leaders stated that any effort to remove an elected government goes against the core values, ethics, and of course duties of the armed forces. So, ladies and gentlemen, this announcement actually marks a shift from early reassurance to formal action. So it shows how internal military systems will actually work when serious concerns arise. So the case is unfolding under close watch as it touches on trust, the discipline, and of course the role of the military within a democratic state, setting the stage for deeper discussion ahead. Before we continue, ladies and gentlemen, as usual, please gently support this local community or channel by liking the video, subscribing, and of course turning on notifications. Your support helps us bring calm and of course clear news stories like this to more important people like you. Thank you so much for your understanding. Now let's continue deeper. Now let us look at who is actually involved and why this situation matters, ladies and gentlemen. The main institution in this case are Nigeria's armed forces and of course the civilian government led by President Bola Tinubu. The officers involved are active members of the military who were bound by service rules and of course loyalty to civilian authority. So following the October arrest, ladies and gentlemen, last year 2025, the military leadership chose to rely on internal checks instead of public trials at first. So this approach allows investigators to actually review facts, examine conduct, and of course decide their next steps without pressure. The outcome or results of that process is the decision to proceed with military court trials for some officers. Guess what, ladies and gentlemen? Military officials explain that such trials are not meant to punish opinions, but to protect discipline. Armed forces around the world depend on clear command, trust, and of course obedience to lawful authority. So when these standards are actually questioned, institutions often respond firmly, but through structured system. So this case also matters because Nigeria holds a key position in West Africa. The country or state has often presented itself as a supporter of civilian rule and of course regional stability. Any concern involving its military draws attention both at home and of course abroad. Experts often or always explain that coup attempts or plans for them usually grow from several pressures. So these can actually include frustration over leadership, stress from long military operations, limited resources, internal divisions, or loss of trust between soldiers and political leaders. So in some cases, wider public anger or regional examples can also influence thinking within the ranks. Okay, so for Nigeria, ladies and gentlemen, addressing such issues early is seen as important or very essential. So the military's response signals a desire to deal with concerns internally whilst keeping the civilian system intact, a point that continues to shape public discussions. To understand the weight of this development, ladies and gentlemen, it helps to bring at Nigeria's past and present environment. Nigeria has actually experienced several military takeovers between 1966 and of course 1993. Okay, so those years left deep marks on political life, public trust, and of course national institutions. Okay, so since 1999, the country has remained under uninterrupted civilian rule. Okay, a period often highlighted by both leaders and of course citizens. So during the civilian era, ladies and gentlemen, the military has repeatedly stated its loyalty to democratic government. Public statements over the years, ladies and gentlemen, have actually emphasized respect for the constitution and elected leaders, including the current administration under President Bola Tinubu. So this history actually explains why authorities respond quickly to any sign of internal unrest. So in recent times, okay, Nigeria's armed forces have actually faced strong pressure. They are involved in fighting armed groups in the northeast, okay, addressing criminal violence in other regions, and of course responding to communal conflict. Okay, so these duties demand time, energy, and of course resources. Okay, so long deployment and of course public criticism can actually place strain on moral and discipline. At the same time, ladies and gentlemen, West Africa has seen a rise in military takeovers in countries such as Mali, Burkina Faso, Niger, and of course Guinea. Okay, so these events, okay, have actually raised concern across the region. Nigerian officials have actually often spoken about the need to protect democratic systems, especially within the ECOWAS regional group. Within this setting, even unproven rumors can actually cause tension. Military leaders have often denied claims of unrest in their ranks, stressing unity and of course professionalism. So the current case shows how such claims are actually tested through internal systems rather than public debate. So ladies and gentlemen, reactions so far have remained measured. Officials continue to stress fairness, lawful process, and of course institutional values. Looking ahead, this situation carries important lessons for Nigeria and of course the region. Okay, so the military court process will actually show or display how internal justice works when serious accusation actually arise. Okay, so authorities have said the goal is accountability without abandoning fairness or legal standards. For the civilian government led by, President Bola Tinubu, okay, the case highlights the need for, steady civil-military relations. Okay, so clear communication, respect for rules, and of course attention to welfare within the armed forces are often seen as key to long-term stability. So these steps can actually reduce the conditions that sometimes lead to unrest in active regimes or governments. Across Africa, ladies and gentlemen, many observers note that coups attempt or coup d'etat actually often happened where institutions are weak, public trust is low, or military stress is high. Addressing these issues early can actually help prevent future crisis. Nigeria's approach appears aimed, okay, at handling concerns before they actually grow larger. So the outcome of the trials may also influence how Nigeria is viewed within West Africa as a leading regional voice. Its actions send signals about commitment to democratic order and of course rule-based systems. So careful handling may strengthen confidence among neighbors and of course partners. So for now, the process remains ongoing. Okay, details will actually emerge or appear through official channels as the military or judicial panel proceeds. Okay, so until then, ladies and gentlemen, the focus stays on calm observation and respect for institutions. Okay, so if you actually found this explanation or analysis very helpful, please like the video if you haven't, subscribe if you haven't, and of course turn on notifications. Okay, thank you so much for staying informed